All right, next up, we are so excited to feature three incredible companies exploring really exciting applications of the future of visual and immersive experiences. Today, we have with us the creators and founders of Rosebud AI, Sensorium, and Scatter. I'm going to turn it over to my awesome colleague, Abron, to take it away.
Thank you so much, Erica. I'm really excited for this one. I'm a geek myself, along with everybody else who really enjoys immersive media, VR, AR, mixed reality. And to be honest, we're all waiting, right? We're waiting to see when does it reach that level where we know it can mirror what we get from our televisions, our phones, and from the theaters. And I think we're close, and I think we're there. So we're going to have presentations today by three great creatives in this space. And we're going to start with Lisha. And then after the presentations, we're going to go into a larger discussion around the medium, where it's headed in the future, and where we are now. So Lisha, if you could take it over from here.
All right, thank you. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you for inviting me to participate. I'm Lisha, and we are Rosebud AI. So what we do is enable virtual production for digital talent on demand. I'll go into exactly what that means, but some of the motivations are the problems that we're trying to solve, which are fairly obvious facts. So one, video and photo shoots are costly. They are also slow and time consuming to create. And finally, there's also a very timely need for a remote friendly production process, especially right now. So what we do is we specialize in creating digital media of virtual talent on demand. And this could be somebody's digital double, or it could be completely based on, beings that don't exist. And so a lot of my background comes from research in deep learning, and in particular, GANs, generative adversarial networks, that are responsible for some of the more wacky results in deep fakes that you see in the media. And I also spent some time in venture capital. And so I saw an opportunity where there was a lot of, I think, creative augmentation potential in a lot of the tools here. So aside from, I guess, some of the more dystopian use cases, I really wanted to sit in the front seat to mold it towards more creative ones. And so what we're building is supposed to address some of these problems. So on-demand creation, editing of photos, focusing on virtual talent, so faces and people, and to make it affordable and accessible for just, I guess, more small business owners. See it as really putting the tools of like advanced production processes to sort of more hands. And finally, I think just an interesting kind of thing of the times is that this happens also to be fairly pandemic proof. And so we've seen more organic interest as a result of COVID, just because a lot of the more physical based processes aren't possible right now. So what was a nice to have has evolved more towards a need to have. And so some of the vision that really kind of drives us and makes us really passionate about this stuff is, we think of it as like enabling storytelling at the speed of thought. So creating visuals, creating characters. If you can sort of do this in an on-demand process, you're really enabling people to tell stories much more with less friction. So that's kind of what we're motivated by. So, okay, now just to share some visuals and videos of our products. First thing we launched last year was this thing called Generative Photos. It is a web app where we do on-demand generation of these photos, mainly based on like the faces and creating attributes for the face that correspond to what brand owners and marketers really want. It's a virtual process, obviously. It's done with deep learning. And one of the value props that we discovered for a lot of these people is that they didn't want to end up using the same stock models as a lot of other companies, especially their competitors, which is a shockingly kind of common thing that happens, at least with startups. It's available at app.generative.photos. And this is a quick GIF of how the app actually works. So you can go in there and start altering kind of on demand of any photo that you submit and upload. Here's some more examples of V1 of the product where we, fixed on several identities that we can kind of directionally change a photo towards. Starting with photos really allowed us to learn better what customers wanted to control. And so, going back to the vision of like, what is, like some storytelling at the speed of thought, we also wanted to take our learnings to full body shots. And so there was an obvious other application within fashion that we got some demand on. And so we started training models to generate the entire body. And so this is the virtual model product. Value prop is fairly obvious for the retail industry, as it's faster time to market. Again, and here are some examples of how that works. You can customize the faces. And then more recently, we jumped onto videos, and it's a very kind of logical step in our pipeline, because by focusing on people and creating virtual beings, a lot of the same processes and architectures that we use for generating photos can be moved into video. And so after we gained learnings about the kind of control that people are care about in terms of their creations, that then can be optimized in the process for creating videos. And so this is a project which we called Humans of AI, and how I got connected with Ebran on is sort of this collaborative fiction. We had access to the GPT-3 API, and so I decided to create these prompts for just fictional characters. And because there was text, we can actually use this new video generation pipeline we've designed, where can create a new face with the original photo product, use the text, and then actually feed into
the Sikh religion is a very straightforward path to peace. Our gurus teach that there is only one God, and no one can reach God but God himself. And that's the truth. Nothing can happen that is outside the will of God. If you're sick and you die, it's God's will. If you're healthy and alive, it's God's will. So every time I go to the doctor, I thank him for keeping me alive.
So yeah, you can learn more about the project at Rosebud AI, but none of the text was human written, and this is just kind of to serve, I mean, obviously it was trained on data that was written by humans, and so it was very interesting to just kind of feed it prompts that were very similar to the Humans of New York project, and see what it dreams up, and then pair it with the visuals, because, you know, we're all very visual beings, and so being able to animate it has kind of given it new dimension. I think also what was interesting about this is then some of the inbound for our new video product has come from very, I think, creative and artistic backgrounds. And so even things that we wouldn't have thought about, which, you know, include maybe film directors who wanted to just scope out an initial kind of like a reading of their script, like this kind of technology really kind of showed them that, okay, maybe I can do that on demand in a not very, you know, like obviously this is not in the end production product, but it really helped them kind of imagine how their characters should look like. And so combining our ability to make faces with the ability to animate them, so enabled that kind of process. Here's another example. Again, this is kind of interesting, and I guess in a more thought-provoking way. So this one generated something about a cop, and he's, you know, also
I'm a cop. It's my job to serve and protect, but it's been a long time since I've been able to do that. I used to see people trying to help each other. It was an honor to serve and protect them. And to see them, you'd think they were more...
You know, Ron's also generated some characters as well, so you should check that out. And so finally, you know, this alludes to what Talking Heads was also originally envisioned to do. Some people who wanted it for instructional videos and promotional videos. So here's
this elegant entertainer's dream home is available for private showings this weekend. 5 bedrooms, 3 full bathrooms, and a half bathroom with detached guest cottage on a sunny and...
So this is still in private beta, and what we're trying to do is also include the full body into the generation, because, you know, very rarely do we have just the head speaking to you. But yeah. And then lastly, just for fun, we've released a lower dimensional or lower resolution consumer version of this app, and to sort of combat any malicious use cases, there's more caricatures of political figures that you can find on talkingheads.com. But here's an example where you can just actually input not text but audio and get it to sync automatically to a photo.
Enough guy, just always so puff guy. I'm that bad type, make your mama sad type, make your girlfriend mad type.
Yeah, and so I get a chuckle out of this, but I think actually one of the other speakers in this conference is the creator of Lil Michaela. So yeah, I think just anything where people are trying to tell stories with either virtual or real personas, this can be a tool in their arsenal. Oh, and finally, just to show the more examples of like real audio clips, Lana Del Rey released some read poetry in audio form, and so you can actually just pair it with her face, and it generates this more, I guess, video dream.
I left my city for San Francisco. Took a free ride off a billionaire's jet. LA, I'm from nowhere, who am I to love you? LA, I've got nothing, who am I to love you when I'm feeling this way and I've got nothing to offer?
So as you can see, the video product is still in its, especially the consumer version, they're in nascent stages, but we're honing on it fast, and I think there's a lot of interesting use cases that can help creators here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisha. That was great. Yes, we did meet through this program. I'm part of your beta, and I've had a lot of fun with it, and also trying to create representations and people of color in there, just get representations in there. So thank you. I have a ton of questions. I know Erica does too, but we're going to save it for the end and have a larger discussion. I'm sure the guys have questions as well. But we're going to move on to the next presenter. So thank you again for that. And next up, we have Matt. Matt, take it away.
My name is Matthew Niederhauser. I am a co-founder of Sensorium along with John Fitzgerald. We are an experiential studio that focuses especially on XR development and are really into experiences that transcend physical and digital spaces. I'm going to be sort of presenting two projects. One that was recently premiered at Sundance called Metamorphic, that was created along with Wesley Alsbrook, Ellie Zananiri, and John Fitzgerald. And then another one that sort of dovetails a little bit more into how we're thinking about artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I'll just go ahead and dive straight into Metamorphic, which is sort of one of our, a project produced out of the studio that we're really interested in taking into directions that would incorporate machine learning and other sort of artificially intelligent technologies. So Metamorphic is this experience that was initially premiered as a social experience between two people that was based off of the artwork of Wesley Alsbrook. And she is this incredible illustrator, painter, drawer who can create these amazing worlds in 3D. And we really tried to put something together where it felt like you embodied her characters, and then through interaction in a shared virtual space, we're able to body swap. I'll sort of try to break down what that means, but I'm going to show a trailer first that also includes the excellent music of Tim Fain. Essentially what we were doing was taking these quill assets done by Wesley into Unity, and then created a back-end system where we could dynamically sort of draw them on and off. Ellie Zananiri made a complete system where essentially we could control how these environments would sort of come in around you dynamically. And this was super important in terms of how we introduced the participants to sort of the environment, and also that it was like dynamic and malleable. But also, as you'll sort of see in a second, it really also had to, was used to play with people's sense of embodiment. So not only were you moving around this world where interactivity could potentially draw or undraw certain environmental elements, it was also could change how your own appearance looked. So we dynamically rigged quill assets up through Houdini, and then based on your interaction with the environment or other characters or people, you would actually take on their aesthetic appearance, essentially having this ability to body swap as you move through an experience. So this is actually in headset, and at the beginning of the experience, we open it up by sort of introducing yourself to your new body, and this is like in a fully tracked environment. And so you're slowly watching your new sort of avatar be drawn onto you dynamically. This is some footage from our Sundance installation, where you can also see that we initially split the character, not the character, split the participants in half. And you sort of first introduce them to their new form. And then after that, you started introducing environmental elements that if you interacted with would take on new appearances and sort of switch between the different worlds. And then at that point, we would draw the curtain, and they would potentially then realize that they were in the same virtual space together. And this was always like a first really amazing moment when they realized that the physical boundary was gone and that they could interact with each other in the virtual space, and was sort of like the first eye-opener, and usually got these really amazing sort of reactions. The second major element, and what I want to talk about more, is that we'd have these sort of, we called them fakers, but they were digital avatars coming into the space that would sort of react to you and also try to like approach and interact with you. And eventually there was even like a third surprise element. We'd send in a third person in the mocap suit as well. And all of a sudden there would be like a third physical person in the space. And we're sort of essentially trying to play with what you feel is like, you know, real or virtual, what's in your physical space, what's not. And then there's a very sort of dramatic visual ending where the world eventually undraws itself. But one of the, even though we had a ton of great reactions from the experience at Sundance, and this is obviously something we have to pivot to in this new world where we can't do installations like this, but we are trying to think about what it means to engage people in virtual spaces, and especially about consent and how to empower people who potentially don't know how they're going to encounter people in a virtual space. And this is also especially important for sort of our digital characters, our fakers. This is sort of going back to them. And you know, how we are trying to discover some ways of potentially having some machine learning algorithms or some understanding of intent of whether or not somebody wants to engage with these sort of digital characters or not. And it's a major concern right now is sometimes people don't want to interact with these people, and how can we understand that dynamically within the experience itself? And it's still one of the hardest things to take into consideration is how somebody is reacting to the experience, and you know, being able to understand to sort of take care so that we're not hurting anybody, and also that people have sort of full consent in terms of how they're interacting both with real and digital characters. And in that sense, you know, we're trying to think about how we can gather data sets or look at what are physical poses or reactions that can be dynamically understood, and in some ways try to control digital characters so that they react better to the participants. And I think this is something that's super important, not just for a singular art piece like this, but, you know, in larger virtual shared social settings that include digital avatars and actors. This is an experience we're now turning into a single player experience, and we're trying to figure out some ways to also create it so it can be networked online. But we've obviously had to pivot how we're thinking about this, because in January, like, oh, we're going to try to take it and do installations all over the world with it. And a lot of cultural institutions obviously are not going for that right now.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. We're going to touch on some of that a bit in the discussion portion. Thank you again, Matt. Alex, if you're ready to go, I'll turn it over to you to wrap up the presentation portion, and then we can jump into a bit of discussion.
Hi, I'm Alexander Porter. I'm a co-founder at Scatter. So Scatter, we're based here in New York City, in Brooklyn, and our studios are in Bushwick. And my co-founders and my team, we're all an interdisciplinary group of artists and engineers. And we think of ourselves as a team responsible for defining and for enabling a new discipline that we call volumetric filmmaking. With our first product and our product line, Depthkit, which is the most widely used tool for creating holograms and virtual experiences with real human beings. So volumetric filmmaking to us is a entirely new discipline that has essentially driven our work from the beginning. It's a new genre in immersive media and in virtual representation. So the way we think about it, it's sort of a marriage between film and video games. And what's unique about it is that it combines the kind of the freedom, the dynamism, the ability to explore that's present in the context of games and game engines, with the kind of the craft and the sensibility and the impact of filmmaking. So what that enables to us is it allows you to take stories told by real people, present in real places, and start to expand them into virtual spaces. And increasingly, it's our belief that these are the kinds of tools that we need to be able to use in order to tell the stories of the level of complexity that are happening now in the world. And it ultimately allows you then, as a user or a viewer of these experiences, to physically find yourself and feel your own body or presence inside of these experiences, allowing you to walk through the environments where these stories are taking place, or allowing us to create worlds that are as immersive and as profound as our real world. And one critical philosophy that we have at Scatter is that we use these tools to tell stories that we feel cannot be told in any other way. And for us, that ends up being often nonfiction stories or contemporary stories dealing with the issues of our moment. So at Scatter, when we define our work and when we consider what we're doing, we have essentially three main pillars. Because the way we think about our work is, it's quite large. It's a big task in the sense that our goal is really to enable and define an entirely new medium, an entirely new format, and a new form. And so when we're doing that as a company, we celebrate the hybridity I mentioned earlier. And we do that by inspiring other projects or other teams or creators, students, etc., by creating what we consider to be inspiring or meaningful work that is contemporary, work that is political, work that's important. The second pillar for us is about enablement. So for us, it's actually meaningless if we inspire external teams if we can't then follow up and enable them to join us, to participate, to contribute to the same dialogue and the same conversation. And then, given that we are all working at the fringe of a new set of technologies, at the fringe of a new set of creative forms, it's critical to have community, to have support, to have mutual relationships and mutual aid, to allow you to actually sustainably create in this way. So for us, that third pillar is about enabling and creating community. Inclusive spaces where creators can discover and create together. So in our work, we lead with our original volumetric and immersive and XR virtual reality content. I'm going to just sort of gloss over this. This could be a whole conversation, obviously. And I've shown a few of our projects here that go back all the way back to 2014. Clouds was released and shown at MoMA, at the Sundance Film Festival in 2014. Very much the first volumetric film in this space. My kind of directorial debut in terms of virtual reality was the project called Blackout, the third one. It's really the first volumetric documentary experience that allows you to physically walk around inside the space, which we premiered at Tribeca Film Festival in 2017. And there's another project, 0 Days VR, for which we won an Emmy actually 2 years ago yesterday in News and Documentaries, which is the story of the Stuxnet computer virus and the United States' role in unleashing what we consider to be essentially a whole new phase in global politics and global warfare, which we are kind of encountering today. So these are our projects. And then the last one is a project called Changing Same, which is in production right now, which is a collaboration with the Rada Film Group. So when we set out to make these projects, and when we really found our voice in creating in this way, there were no tools that pre-existed. There was no way to make these projects possible. And so in order to start creating, we very much had to create our own tools. And the first tool, and this is, as I was mentioning earlier, this is sort of that pillar of enablement. That first tool that we created is called Depthkit. And what it allows a creator to do is to film in virtual reality using off-the-shelf hardware like an Azure Connect or a Intel RealSense to create and capture human performances and present them in three-dimensional spaces, as I mentioned before. So it's quite approachable from a production standpoint. It can be as simple as what I'm showing here, which is, you can see on the right, it's a cinema camera paired with, in this case, an Azure Connect, which is a Microsoft product that's relatively affordable. And it allows you to film at length and to post-process and then ultimately present that form in whatever context makes most sense. And so oftentimes projects will get presented inside video game engines, like Unity is a common one, on the web, in mobile applications, or even just embedded into feature films, into visual effects contexts. And one thing I'll point out in this kind of this looping GIF here, it represents a philosophy that we have, which is that when we think about these tools, it's critical to us that we are enabling both the kind of photorealistic, the kind of real presence, the real presence of a human being, to enable kind of straightforward and powerful or documentary stories, and also the surreal, the dreamlike, the kind of magical as well. Because it's our view that when you start to talk about virtual creation, you start to have to deal with the kind of internal spaces of people as well. And when we remember or when we imagine or dream, it's not always photorealistic. And so it's important to us that with our tools, we're always managing that scope. So I'm going to kind of introduce you to a few products that we have kind of out now or available now. And the first one is a tool called Depthkit Cinema. And Depthkit Cinema is a tool that allows you to create these full, lush kind of holograms at up to 8K resolution, 8,000 pixels across using cinema cameras. It's really, it enables creators to integrate their existing tools, specifically filmmakers, to work with their existing tools and allowing them to use those exact same assets in entirely new forms and spaces. And so for us, the dream is really that we can create tools that allow people who have existing mastery in tools like the camera, or in disciplines like filmmaking or cinema, to enable teams like that to really step into an entirely new world. And what that world often looks like is this. So this is a collaboration we did with Image and Heap and the Wave VR that allowed them to create a virtual, live streamed concert, presented both in a kind of live stream format like this, and also in virtual reality, presenting Image and Heap controlling the sort of environment around her in this surreal and supernatural way. And what enables that is our integration, deep integration with the game engine Unity, and new capabilities inside of Unity, like the visual effects graph or the shader graph, which take very complex challenges that even a few years ago were the skills to manipulate geometry and computer graphics in this way was quite rarefied and ultimately then quite expensive. And there's very much a kind of Cambrian explosion in terms of the accessibility of tools that can create dynamic and gorgeous atmospheres and experiences like this one here. So there's something I want to share with you that I'm quite excited about, which is our kind of very latest project, which is a tool set that we're calling Depthkit Studio, and we're just putting it into a pilot right now. And yes, that is me, and this is just a sort of quick experiment I did. But specifically, it allows you to not only create captures from the front. You would have seen in the presentation that many of these performances were almost like a relief, like a single view relief. And in this case, it allows you to create full human beings and walk around them, very much in the way that we initially previewed in the project Blackout that I described earlier. So we would encourage anyone watching this to join our pilot. We have a lot of interest and a lot of engagement with this right now, and we are trying to create a really vibrant and really creative group as a kind of pilot group while we roll this out more widely to the world. So essentially, in conclusion, I want to share that, like, as a human being doing this work, it's a lot. We are a very small team, and we've taken on an extraordinary amount. And what gives me life is the fact that people are using our tools to create absolutely extraordinary works. So I'm showing you here, there are literally hundreds of holographic apps and experiences that have been created with Depthkit, without even getting into the films and short films and visual effects. You can see a full list of these on our website, but I really encourage you to find a way to have direct encounters with this kind of work. Go to our website, see this list, download these experiences. The Sensorium team have created some of the pinnacle experiences in this space. I think we might have some on here. But go see them and kind of develop your own kind of direct encounter with what this stuff is, because it's profound, it's unique, and it's very new. And the only thing I'll point out here is we're very excited that right in the middle of the top row here, there's an incredible project called Awavana that just won an Emmy, again, just a few days ago, in news and documentaries. And it's an incredible experience, and it's available to download. So I encourage you to go see that. So the last pillar, as I mentioned, is community. As I said, we are all dealing with an incredible amount in the creative space, in the technical space, running companies in an entirely new domain, and it's critical to have community. So I'm just putting some links up here. Feel free to join us. We have an extraordinary meetup that we do regularly in collaboration with Bill Platt at CNN. We've done most recently with Vimeo or Time Warner, etc. So this is a sort of a place where people get together, now virtually, obviously not in real life. So I would encourage you to follow that or join our kind of online community and share what you're intending to make, build teams, etc. So I just wanted to thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm very excited to take part in this conversation. It's incredibly gratifying to be in a context like this where we can share our work. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Alex. This was great. And again, to the audience, if there's any questions that maybe you wanted to ask or you wanted us to ask that we don't get to because of time, you can carry over that into the chat in the Hoover app for this session. So I encourage everyone to join that conversation, the presenters as well, to jump into the chat, to engage with the audience and have them pick your brains as well. This question is across the board for everyone. So I've been paying attention to this space as we all have been. And I feel like it's still about us who are doing the work of finding this. But when does it get to the normal entertainment consumer? When does it get to a point, are we waiting for new hardware or software to come out to where a family can go out and participate in like a full feature, these are shorts, right? A full length feature, a 2-hour film without needing an eye break or without noticing the generative media elements. Are we there yet, or are we still waiting for certain technology advancements? And now this is across the board, anyone can answer.
I think it's a great question. There's before answering it, I'll caution about one thing, which is when we make too many comparisons to sort of old media, for example, the concept of a feature duration, I think we're missing the fact that there's new forms, there's new formats, there's new encounters and new experiences that are emerging, which should be different. So oftentimes we kind of fall into this all the time. We kind of use those traditions as almost like a crutch. And so it's really important to, as I mentioned in the presentation, to develop direct encounters with this work and ask yourself, in the way that a feature film feels complete at the, whatever the sort of hour and a half duration, do these things feel complete on their own? So I would sort of say, in many cases, the really extraordinary work, well, in some cases, they can be relatively short, and there's different formats emerging, whether formats that are suited for festivals or formats that are suited for distribution. I would encourage you to kind of watch them and ask yourself, does this feel like a complete work? And I will say that the creative community is evolving to an extraordinary degree, and there are masterpieces out there that exist already.
Yeah, no, that's great. Great answer. Thank you.
Yeah,
Erica, do you have a question? Oh, I'm sorry. Does anyone else want to jump in?
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that, that it's definitely sort of occurring right now for sure. And, as Alex said, it's this new amalgamation of these different mediums, especially if you look at like the movement away from like a passive medium like theater or cinema into gaming, and also immersive theater. And that these are occurring right now. And I think one of the best websites tracking things that you can participate in, and obviously COVID has dampened a lot of these efforts, but is through No Proscenium, where I think that it's an excellent list for cities where you can actually go and engage immersive experiences that incorporate, things that might have narrative structure from a movie, or the interactivity you might get from a game, or sort of like the co-presence that comes from immersive theater. So there's these strange amalgamations that are occurring that, I think at its best still have these real physical components and augmented, virtual components. And how that plays out is what makes it so interesting to participate in this field right now. That's because there isn't a feature, for this type of work, and it's super diverse in terms of how it's manifested.
Yeah, it's not apples to apples.
Yeah.
Totally.
I agree. I think in terms of our approach and what excites us about our sort of how users can engage is, really focusing on making it immediate and on demand. And so a lot of short form and things in digital media where, you do need that for kind of interaction and adaptive experiences. Would love for people to play with that are very, very much a departure from older templates of like media.
Yeah.
Agreed. I think we have some really interesting sort of themes around scaling and doing so safely and ethically. This is for everyone, but I'd love to start with Lisha. So, your work really focuses on generative media and deepfakes. How do you think we can scale this safely and ethically?
Yeah, no, I think it's like an ongoing conversation evolution. I mean, there's like so many points here. I mean, first of all, releasing something on the consumer side, you want to make sure that people can't use this for like, obvious like political deep fake reasons. I mean, we've sort of geared that towards like, how do we think about the interface and the kind of inputs that people can put in so that they can't, like repurpose it for something else. The other thing is like, for some of our earlier products, we've geared it towards enterprise. And so some of the choices where we've used it for, say, marketing and retail purposes was that we would gain the same kind of like learnings about the technology, but at least it would be priced in a way that wasn't just like, you can, use it to generate deep fakes of Donald Trump or, Joe Biden, et cetera. So there's kind of like a pricing discrimination there. But I think there's also more subtle points about like, okay, who gets to use, say, this tech in terms of like in a representative way, in a diverse way. To what extent is it kind of like misuse versus actually you're trying to be representative? And I think in that case, I've taken an approach of like really listening to the users and like what are they, what are the intents there? And so I think what's interesting is sometimes it's actually going in a direction where, because you've made it more accessible, because you've made it sort of like technology, and by accessible I mean like it's cheaper, so that like smaller brand owners can use it, or artists who don't have huge budgets can use it. I mean, then it's like much more of an expressive medium. And so I try to, at least since we're in our earlier stages, we can really kind of have a one-to-one correspondence with the users and make sure we're really serving like a more benign purpose.
That's a really great point. We totally agree. I think across all of your projects today, we saw this sort of like paradigm shift between creator and consumer and audience. So I guess, how are we reimagining this sort of interactive nature of storytelling? How do you think your sort of project sort of flipped the script or sort of really push the bounds on that?
Is this directed at me?
For everyone, yeah. You start, Lisha. Yeah.
Maybe one way that I kind of like cash it is like I'm decoupling. I mean, the tech that I'm working on really focuses on virtual personas and like ways to represent the digital self. And I see it as like an opportunity to decouple like how somebody looks to like the way that they want to express themselves, which is, obviously open to like more dystopian like use cases. But I think the exciting part is like, okay, it actually can make things more freeing. And so in some ways, the way that we sort of communicate digitally is extremely rich, and if we can kind of have a very flexible way of just like representing ourselves in very fluid, I guess like physical manifestations, I think that allows creators who want to tell different stories to kind of just have a lot more of a flexible instrument. So just to ground into something, I think very concrete. So there's this like phenomenon of like a virtual celebrity, right? I think Lil Miquela is an example. There's like the virtual YouTubers from Japan that are on the rise. I think that all can like fall under the framework of like decoupling the persona from like the team that makes it. And so it's like, if you're kind of a comedic talent or a musical talent, but you don't want to use yourself as like the puppet for the or even if you don't feel like that is like the most true way that it represents the content you're creating, now there are tools that you can use to do that, which are like a lot more accessible. They're more frictionless. And I think this kind of generative media really opens up exploration in that realm. So that's what's most exciting for me about this area.
It's interesting. I feel, Lisha, that we're almost in opposites in terms of the ways that we're working. A lot of what we're doing is really about taking the sort of specificity of kind of conventional filmmaking, where there's this sort of relationship between you can really sense that the person was present during the capture, and in very many ways, it's kind of a traditional. It's a very kind of almost like antique and traditional approach, where we a lot of the most profound projects we find are really meaningful because you can really tell that a person was really there, right? It's like it's like the documentary sensibility. And one of the things that's really important to us, and kind of getting back to the question of ethics, we have customers that are the biggest companies in the world, but essentially without exception, the most important stories for this moment are not coming from those companies. And it's our view that the most important stories are coming from other places, and what we're dealing with as a wider culture in the world right now in terms of inequities around healthcare, policing, etc. When we think about the kind of next generation of interactive stories, we go out and we do really, it's a lot of work actually to sort of reach out into communities and make sure that our tools are legible, available, it's affordable, etc., for people to tell new stories. And I'll give you one example of that, specifically dealing with this question of interactivity and kind of verisimilitude, or sort of like the sense of a real person being present. One of my favorite projects, sorry, Matthew. One of my favorite projects is a project called Fireflies of Brownsville, which is an extraordinary project that was created. What's that?
It's a great name.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary project, and obviously Brownsville is a neighborhood here in Brooklyn, and the project was made out of a community center in Brownsville, where specifically they're dealing with the kind of entrenched kind of feud between basically communities in two different housing projects. And the teens, they were teens then, that are working on the project, were really adamant that when they're representing people, that they feel grounded and they feel real. And so they were specifically trying to build bridges in a virtual space between people that were ultimately not really seeing each other face to face. And what's meaningful there is that they were able to make this one-to-one representation basically of their neighborhood, and enable kind of navigations and journeys and traversals through that neighborhood that they are not safely, in some cases, able to do themselves. And so in that case, they're making a virtual and an interactive experience where it really matters that those are specific people, and they are then able to listen in a way that ultimately they're not necessarily doing in their general life. And so I think when we think about these emergent kind of opportunities around interactivity, those are the kinds of things that are really exciting to me, because it's not something I would have generated on my own.
And I'd say from a creator standpoint, even though Alex sort of showed how there might be a different approach from the tools that they're creating, I'm excited because I see different possibilities for both of their technologies, where I'm like, oh, like this is when you approach a subject, or a narrative, you almost need to understand what technology is the most appropriate to try to like convey a message. And I think that's what I've already sort of said about it. It's so amazing about the potential diversity, not just in terms of stories being told, but how they're being told, and all very, relevant and important. And, we all know how to like sit in a dark theater and watch a film together, you know what I mean? And that was a very ubiquitous, common thing. But there's just such an explosion of opportunity to mix and match. Or what happens if I, take a deep fake generated avatar and make it speak at and react to a Depthkit asset, you know what I mean? And like, what does that conversation look like? And that's, what's so exciting. And, I'm not gonna lie, it is a little bit scary at the same time for some people. I mean, I have a sort of cautious optimism about, I try to about in life in general. But, social media and a lot of technology has delivered us a really crazy 2020, you know what I mean? And it's something that's gonna be hard to get over a little bit. But I don't know, I feel that this generation of tools and like stories that are coming out are being distributed to just like a much wider audience, and the inception of almost any type of major storytelling medium. Like cinema, for decades, you couldn't access the tools to create those stories, and it defined the medium in a very important way. But I see through festivals, some people in the industry and, the creator studios, there's a really interesting diversity in voices and ways of telling a story that is going to hopefully like take us into a new and more interesting direction.
Totally agree. Thank you, everyone. I think we've got time for one final closing question.
Yeah, so obviously, Matt and Alex, you guys are familiar with each other's work. I've worked with Lisha in the past, and this community is a small one at that. But, are there others in the space that inspire you, that you've looked forward to working with? And maybe there might be other people in this conference that you might be interested in collaborating with.
I can kick it off. One of my favorite collaborators I haven't worked with in a while are Neil Harbison and Moon Rivas, who are these cyborg artists based out of Barcelona. We've done interesting projects with them in the past, and they're really pioneering technology as being able to create new senses for your body. And then if you have new senses, it unlocks new artistic mediums. I mean, I think this is something that's getting into a really crazy area, especially, listen to the Blessed or Not with someone like Elon Musk, like something like Neuralink, and, what's that going to mean, and how do you turn that, usually when you're given a new sense, it creates new art. We've also been working closely with a really amazing artist named Stephanie Dinkins. Well, not super closely recently, but we've helped run a recent project that utilized Depthkit, and she's just doing really fascinating investigations into AI and machine learning, and definitely always suggest checking out her work.
Awesome, thank you. Anybody else?
I'll give a shout out to Artbreeder. It's another platform where you can generate, both landscapes and a way to kind of sort of dream up and mix together images that are basically products of StyleGAN. But it's made by Joel Simon. I think I just love the way that they thought about interfaces there and how to like mix together different elements of stuff. And also one interesting way I've seen people use it is they would create these like fantasy characters through Artbreeder, and then you can pipe it into talking heads and then make it speak, so you can animate the character. So I'd love to see what people can create with a combination.
That's great.
I have one to share, which is we have kind of a long-standing initiative that we call Volumetric Histories, which is really about this continuing to kind of delve at this question of how to tell the most important contemporary stories. And I had this distinct experience that we're living through a historic moment right now, and so the sort of challenge for us right now is are there ways to in a dignified and also really powerful way actually kind of aggregate and tell the stories in a diverse and an appropriate way. And so we have an initiative that we're working on with the Museum of the Moving Image right now, and funded by the Knight Foundation, and I'm very excited about the moment we're in, which is obviously we had to adapt that project, which was going to be an installation, and the question of really how to do that with kind of dignity and to capture just the pure insanity of this moment. I'm excited about that challenge.
You know that. Well, thank you everybody for your time. We're out of time. I would again encourage everyone to join the chat and the community on the Whova app and continue the conversation there. And I think the major takeaway for me is that to stop trying to compare it to the old mediums and to let it be a new medium itself with new standards and creative spaces. Erica, any other final thoughts?
Nope. Thank you all so much. This is incredible to see your work. We look forward to seeing what's next.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye. Oh, kitty.
See ya.
Wow, what a happy cat.